All right.
All right, folks, Ralph Claxton here with Dave Bloom of Ginger Soul Records. And today is an awesome treat, I think, because this dude here has some excellent plugins for one of the outstanding WordPress sites out there called Headway. And I can't remember how I bumped into Dave and met him, but I'll think of it before this is all over with. But what we're going to do right now is I'm going to ask Dave a few questions, maybe a lot, about how this all came about. And he's actually going to show you how the plugins work. And he's going to build a site right on this interview. So if you're ready, Dave.
Yep.
Okay, well, man, so let's get started with this thing. First off, you can start wherever you like, but do tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with Headway.
Sure. First of all, I want to say it's a pleasure to be here for episode X. I don't know if this is your first episode, but this is my first official publicly broadcast interview about this stuff. So it's really exciting to me, and I'm glad you put this together.
Yeah.
I came across. I'll give you a little background on where I came into the web world, and then I think I'll be able to explain more in that context where Headway entered the picture. So, first of all, I didn't get into web development until about 2011. Before that, I had done some research into what's called user experience design, which is essentially just a study of web user behaviors, not even just on the web, just using anything, products, services, and ways to make, I found out that that was a profession, and I want to see ways to make that whole thing better, especially in the context of the web, because who hasn't been frustrated with a bad website or a bad app, and if there's anything to be gained from making that experience better for people, there are many different levels of that. There's the level of them actually interacting with it. There's the level of them building it, and it's just different ways to make communication better. Before I even got into that, I worked at a law firm in DC, pretty much just pushing papers, answering emails. Not quite sure what I wanted to do with my life. I had gotten an economics degree from Virginia Tech, graduated in '05, and from 2006 to about 2012, I was just humping a desk in DC, and um, you know, I started to realize during the course of that work that being able to speak and wield, technology in any way could add a lot of value to a business process.
Yes.
And I always had a proclivity for just efficiency. I wanted to figure out ways to make my day go faster, ways to curry favor with people who are above me in the corporate food chain or whatever, and that's how I got into the user experience design, because I saw that there were resources online that really analyzed these processes, and though most user experience design is geared for the web, you can analyze the user experience of pouring yourself a cup of coffee, or pretty much anything that you do. So for a couple of years, I worked in what's called UX, and I helped a gentleman in DC with his web business, and was essentially just a guy who had a knack for making things simpler from a design point of view, from a content point of view, and I would help him and his clients, make their web experiences better. And I started, taking more responsibility. And doing more in terms of graphic design, and then I learned how to do specifications, and learn how to design interfaces, and really learn how to appreciate interfaces, beautiful ones that you see on sites like Apple and all the pretty sites that you see on the web, and understanding that that kind of stuff is really lucrative and really valuable. I mean, Apple has a business because they made the user experience of personal computing into a joy.
Yes.
So after a while, I got really good at designing things for people, but I really wanted to build, because what we were doing, we were outsourcing design work halfway around the world, just to Ukraine or Romania, even India in some instances, and there was a disconnect there, and I wanted to, I thought, hey, I grew up, in the 80s, playing video games. I was probably playing video games most of the 90s too, and there isn't that much, I know how to stare at a screen and make things happen with it. I'm sure that I got the kind of head that could just learn how to do this code thing and learn how to wield things like HTML and CSS and maybe even JavaScript. But at first I was scared of JavaScript. I didn't want anything to do with that. But now it's like my bread and butter.
Why are you scared of? Why are we scared of it?
Well, I think any programming language, when you look at it, it just looks like foreign. It looks like a foreign language that you don't understand, and there's so much complexity, not in just the syntax of a programming language, but the kind of thinking where you have to translate a problem into a conditional statement, or you can put a problem into letters and numbers or symbols. And there was a disconnect, I guess, for everybody, where there's this big gap between when you're doing what many have called blindly manipulating symbols. You're just manipulating a text document, and then somewhere else in another tab, in another program, in another window or something, the magic happens. So I did a lot of research, and that concept of blindly manipulating symbols comes from a gentleman who is arguably my biggest inspiration. His name is Brett Victor, and you can find his website at worrydream.com, and he's this kind of independent, Robin Hood of information technology. He doesn't, I don't know if he works for anybody right now, but he started to convince me that there was a lot more value in connecting those two worlds of code and what code does, and make design and interface design, and bringing them much closer together so you could really see the effect of what you were doing. That's like his mantra, is that people just need to see what they're doing. With code, you can see what you're manipulating in a text document, but then it's a journey somewhere else to see what that effect is, and it's often kind of stop-start. You change the line of code, then you go look at the result, and you can't reach into the result and just tweak it and move it. So, at first I was coming from the world of learning HTML and CSS as a result of my own curiosity, but then I saw WordPress making it, kind of executing this principle a bit and making it easier for people to bridge that gap, so that they could just fill out a form, like a post or a page editor, or just make selections in their menu section in the back end of WordPress, and then have it show up. Now, WordPress, the dashboard, and what gets spat out are also separated by a gap, and it takes a while to get acclimated with WordPress. Now, it's a lot easier than doing the code, because that's just another layer. But then, we were working with, when I was working with this guy, we were working with themes, and anybody who's worked with WordPress and hasn't worked with Headway is definitely familiar with the give and take and the pros and cons of using store-bought themes. Of course, these things purport to give you the whole website for 50 or 60 bucks, but then you realize that you got to learn how to use their theme too, and support can be lacking. And one of my freelance employers consultants told me about Headway right after Headway 3 got released. I think I jumped on board about Headway 3.4. Okay. And at the time, Headway had a website. Had a video on the front page of their website. It was a minute long, exactly. I remember it. It was one of the best product showcases I'd ever seen, because it had no sound, and it just started with a blank slate in the grid. A mouse cursor started drawing blocks with a marquee, started drawing a header block and a navigation block and a content block and a widget sidebar and a footer. And then that mouse pressed save, and it went to another tab, opened the website up. It looked exactly how it was drawn in those blueprints. And then they took the mouse cursor and dragged the window, because that was right when the responsive grid started coming out. And they dragged the window down, and the text resized itself. It was fluid, and then the video stopped. And I looked at that and I said, there it is. That is exactly the connection that people need. At least amateur developers, between what they're drawing and what they're choosing to put on a page, and then what's getting kicked out on the other end. So I looked more and more into Headway. I watched AJ Morris's How to Build a Site in 10 Minutes, which was probably recorded 4 years ago now. I watched Corey Freeman's videos at the start, introduced myself to Corey, and I could see that there was an opportunity, aside from those two people, for me to become really well versed in this thing and to make, extensions for it, because I want to build, my own blocks. I was writing the same chunks of code over and over again for what I was doing. I was thinking, why don't we just save this as a module and then just have a bunch of puzzle pieces with which I can just build a site really quickly, and the rest is history. I've been in the third-party development sphere for about just over a year. I think jQuery came out in September of 2013, and I'd done a few hacks before I actually got into the block development, but actually Corey was the one who recorded a video on how to build a block, and it just all started clicking for me that this was a framework that, despite its learning curve, despite the way it abstracts, code concepts into its editors, and despite, any flaws it may have along the way, because it's a work in progress just like anything else, this is the closest thing that I've seen to having the best of both worlds, to be able to drag and drop and customize what you want, but to also be able to modify and adjust without code. So yeah, that's what got me into Headway, and that's where I started.
So you didn't try any other WordPress themes after Headway to say, let me check this one out, like Themify or Thesis, anything like that?
I never jumped in on those, because I think I did some research at the time and tried to do some comparison shopping with respect to what the difference was between Thesis and Genesis, and Pagelines was popping off then.
Yeah.
Squarespace was around, but I've always kind of looked past Squarespace, because those Squarespace is just beautiful design. I'm sure the interface is spectacular. To me, what was so special about Headway, first of all, was that it leveraged WordPress, and WordPress is a 10-year-old technology, so you've had 10 years of people bug fixing it and supporting it and building plugins for SEO and e-commerce and and calendars and all the things that you need a website to do. And it was also open source, so that somebody like me could sneak in and actually start to make some a living off of it.
Yeah.
Now, as far as like Genesis and Thesis and all that, from what I saw in their promotional materials, I mean, their websites are great. I looked at Genesis pretty closely. There's a guy named Bill Erickson who I think is a professional like Genesis guy, and he does a lot of work with that. But I still didn't see that connection, that drag and drop connection. I think the editor in Genesis, and I'm just guessing because I haven't really even done my homework on it, but the choices that you make are in WordPress. They're not in a separate kind of visual editor like Headway has. And from what I saw, it just didn't have, I think I looked up a few YouTube videos on people doing intros for it. It just didn't have that same kind of tactile connection. And I don't even know how strong their API was to help third-party people like me make blocks for it. So though I believe that Headway is obviously not the only game in town, and it's confusing to me kind of that they are so tucked away in their niche because of the power that this has. But I think it really has something to do with the way I feel about making the user experience of people developing sites better. I talk to a lot of developers. A lot of developers don't like Headway at all because it challenges their concept of how a website is supposed to be made. A lot of people think that you need to keep design and development and marketing and administration separate, and then they all talk to each other, and do their best to communicate their different disciplines to each other. In my opinion, I think it's a developer's responsibility to make the design tools accessible so that people who really need to be on the web and who need to shine on the web can do so. Because It's like any other information asymmetry in professions like law. Lawyers have all the keys to the kingdom because they did all their homework and they went to law school. So regular people don't really have that information. The same thing is with code. If you were dorky enough to go through all the tutorials and dig in on lynda.com and read all the books and go after this stuff, then you have this power over people to whom this kind of code stuff just is frightening almost. But I thought, hey, communication technologies have been commoditized since the printing press came out, or since written language came out. I'm sure back in the day, not a whole lot of people even knew how to read, and they had to get scribes and town criers to do their communicating for them. But eventually, the tools with which to master languages and to communicate them and write them have become more and more user-friendly, and that really helps people, as we've seen with like Twitter and Facebook, reach out and make themselves more visible and communicate better. So Headway just seemed to nail this on the head. And after, I guess, a few months of working with Headway, I thought, all right, I'm already invested. I could every couple of months a new snazzy theme will come out, WordPress X theme, or you go on ThemeForest and look at the bestseller, and it's got a bunch of bells and whistles in it. But what I know is that they do a good job of marketing themselves, and that a lot of the power with this is just knowing it and being comfortable with them. And you can use a Mac or PC to do pretty much the same stuff, but it's all about what you're comfortable with. And I figured, hey, this is the horse that I'm gonna run with. So
Cool.
yeah.
Tell me this, Dave. What was the first block you made? What was the first one? Was it the nav, or was it the soul section?
First one was jQuery,
Okay.
and I called it jQuery a little bit without doing enough homework, because there is a jQuery. It's like a Google code kind of framework, but I just called it jQuery because I had just named my business Ginger Slow Records, and I noticed that JavaScript and jQuery and Headway are rare. Most of their blocks don't really use it, with the exception of like the slider block. Other third-party plugins don't make a whole lot of use of it, but it's such a powerful programming language with the web. It's just an absolutely essential thing to know. That I wanted to just build a translator almost that would help amateurs be able to make selections to execute JavaScript and more specifically jQuery commands without having to write out the actual functions and the actual methods and syntax. So the first thing I did with Headway before they even had fluid layouts, because Headway was built for desktop composing, just like pretty much every other framework, because mobile responsive design really only started gathering steam in 2010, so it was pretty new. I mean, the iPhone only came out in 2007. So my first thing before I even built the block was a series of CSS rules, and maybe the YouTube video is still up somewhere, that I had hard-coded to give Headway's columns, which were previously a fixed width, a percentage-based width, so that they would like fluidly expand inwards and outwards, like kind of like an accordion. But I guess accordion's not the right word, because that's a different kind of web structure. So when Headway got updated their framework, I think it might have been at like 3.5 or something like that, when they started putting fluid stuff in there, I realized that I needed to be able to target the containers for all the blocks and make them larger and smaller depending on how, give them different attributes depending on what size my screen was, whether I was looking on a mobile device, a tablet, desktop, or larger. And the way that Headway actually builds its layouts, the way that the grid actually builds HTML, is that it wraps every block in two other containers, columns and rows, and that's traditionally how grid systems are built. You have rows, and then you have columns within those rows, and then you have your elements, your divs within those columns. So to this day, Headway's rows and columns, you can look at any Headway site, inspect the element, or just look at the source, and you can see this hierarchy, but they don't have unique identifiers. they don't have classes or IDs. Their innards do. You have a block ID or a block alias,
Right.
and that's where all the key of selecting something and giving it a certain style is all about latching on to that either class or ID or attribute. So they don't have that. So what I needed to do was use jQuery, which I had really just learned, to say, all right, well, we're gonna accept a selector. We're gonna accept this alias of a block or the block ID, and then we're gonna find its relative row container. So you just go up 2 levels and find who is housing this block, and then and then look to see how wide the screen is. If the screen is this wide, then just give that container that width. So that it just kind of finds its parent row every time, and that's it. That was the foundation of jQuery, and I still use it every day, because it's important for Headway to keep their HTML pretty clean, and that's where JavaScript is so magical, because JavaScript can find children, it can find parents, it can find anything. It can find one character and one word in one element on the page, and that's the magic of what's called the DOM, or the document object model. You just kind of traverse it, you find the rows container, and then you say, all right, row container, we're going to need you to shrink down because this is getting too big. Or if, on mobile, maybe you want to be full width, but on desktop you want to be 50%, and I'll show you that when I start building. And after that, I thought, all right, well, jQuery is such an expansive library of these JavaScript shortcuts, including finding a parent. Why don't I just start building all of the things that jQuery can do? And it's hundreds of things, and I still haven't even I've barely scratched the surface of it. I mean, maybe I've scratched a little bit of the surface. I've made some progress, but not only does the library itself have all these capabilities, but the community has built all of these plugins that leverage it. And these things are just so far beyond the scope of what a regular Headway user is expected to know. And to my experience, I've met less than a handful of people that even know JavaScript that use Headway. Because again, like I said before, developers just don't think this way. They don't think about making it easier. They think about, getting a contract or something like that, or doing some real heavy lifting. So yeah, that's how jQuery was born, and then I started adding some features like click events and DOM insertion, which just means putting things inside of other things, putting a slider inside of some content, or some content inside of a slider, and it just kind of grew from there. People still buy jQuery mostly because Headway still doesn't have a way to do that kind of targeted responsive design without writing media queries out. I assume that at some point they will just start giving their rows and columns, selectors that kind of are akin to what's inside them. I would do that, but for now it's still working, and it's it's still doing well.
Well, that being said, that was going to lead to my next question. Has Headway reached out to you, or you to Headway, to say, hey guys, how about adding this in the next update?
Yeah, well, Headway didn't reach out to me, but I definitely have been, over the past year, I have tried to get some of these blocks into Headway, and I had a bit of, let's just say I had a bit of growing up to do with respect to being professional, and also being kind of understanding of what Headway's business model is. Now, I haven't had a conversation with Headway about it, but the bottom line is these blocks are, because they are built by a developer and they are dealing with advanced concepts like conditional coding and all of the stuff that I just harped down upon, I think that Headway believes that it's too much of, I guess I'm not speaking for them, but this is what I'm thinking. They think it might be a little bit too advanced for their user base, and that putting these blocks in the Extend marketplace may introduce a storm of support tickets, or just confuse their users, and their users are used to a simple drag and drop. This is going here, this is going there, and I don't disagree. I mean, I think that I'm happy to be a part of this third-party community that can introduce shortcuts to moderate to advanced users of this framework that are still professional developers, that are still building sites for people. But if I come across a solution like conditional row sizing or inserting something here or there that can help somebody who's in that niche of a niche impress their client by showing them a website that performs beautifully on mobile, and get paid that much more for what I do, then I believe that I have the reason, I have a justification to ask them for compensation. I can sell them that solution for $50 because you can sell the results of it for hundreds. And I just want to, I don't want to just kind of hold on to this solution myself. I'm very very much trying to turn these into products that everybody's using, but I never really I thought that SolNav was going to go into Extend, but SolNav does some crazy hijinks too. It takes the whole wrapper, the white wrap, like the whole wrapper of wrappers, and kind of puts it into a separate container so that off-canvas areas on the left and right can have fixed positioning while you scroll. And that starts to really bend the rules of what the grid is designed to do. The grid was designed to be a visual approximation of your site. But now, for me, the grid is just a way to get all the puzzle pieces out there into the HTML document, and then I start to go crazy with the JavaScript and say, all right, you go here, you go there, you behave like this. I do think that some of the ideas behind something like Soul Sections would be appropriate to put in Extend. I've also got to negotiate my own business, my own support form. I've got about 125 users on my site that are all extremely helpful, extremely knowledgeable people. And I think that if Headway probably has a few thousand users, and if these blocks went up for sale, I might find myself overwhelmed. Right. But I've reached out to Clay, who invented Headway, a lot, and I've come to the realization that I need to be a bit humble about this. Yes, these solutions are popular and they're very well received, but I also need to make sure that I'm not telling them how to design their framework, right. And that I'm understanding that they keep the door open for customization to allow guys like me to make these things, and I really appreciate that. I don't want to say, all right, this is how you got to do your thing, because maybe they've learned lessons and they've been around for 5 years now. Yeah. So I'm sure they know, like, all right, we got this, man. Like, we're serving a bunch of people and we don't want their sites to break because we decided to go in a different direction. I think it's wise. But again, I'm speaking for them. I haven't had a personal conversation with them. I've emailed, but sometimes, I'm sure they're busy handling updates to the framework and security stuff and all kinds of stuff. And, like I said, the majority of their user base would probably just be confused by this, and I think they're maybe happier holding down the fort than risking that. But it's all good for me. It's a good lesson, and I'm using Headway. The Ginger Soul Records journey does not end with Headway. Headway is an example of somebody that's doing something right, but it's also helped me focus on what my message is. My message used to be make websites for money. Now my message is more like help people make websites for money, or help people just make websites for getting their word out there, getting their organization to look good, or getting helping them sell their knickknacks, or whatever it takes. If I can design tools to help people communicate better and have a better presence on the web, then I'm happy whether it's raking in the money or not. But we'll see where that goes. I think I'll have a chance to make some blocks that are a little bit more Headway user friendly, and I've learned some lessons about that too.
Look, before we go any further, let's back up just a little bit. Ginger Soul Records, where in the world did that come from?
Okay. I used to call myself, the first name I had for, I guess, it was just on my invoices. It was Bloom UX. And I thought about, kind of the whole ideas behind company names, and I could have called my thing Dave Bloom Design or Dave Bloom's Plugins or whatever, davisplugins.com. But I've always had, well, first of all, Ginger Soul is kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of joke. There was a meme that emerged several years ago, courtesy of the South Park fellows, um, that claimed that gingers had no souls. I'm a redheaded guy, so and I've always enjoyed that because gingerness and redheadedness has always been an interesting little subsection of the culture. Like it's not necessarily an ethnicity, but it's also something that can't be ignored, And I've always been into music. I started out actually as a DJ, and the only reason I really got into technology, other than the workplace story I told you, was because I wanted to find a way to funnel better beats into my ears. I spent a lot of time when I was at that desk listening to blogs, and MP3s were really, MP3 DJing was just huge, and Ableton was huge, and all these music software was really popping off. The only reason I got a Mac was because Windows would crash at a live show, and you just can't have that. And so I have since developed an appreciation. I've always loved soul music. I really like neo soul music, and I thought, why not just have a little fun with that pun and say Ginger Soul. The records thing is the one that throws everybody off because they're like, well, what are you, a record label? And I'm thinking, oh, well, no. But it just seemed like it was almost like divine intervention, or something just kind of clicked in my head where these words just kind of flowed together. And I always wanted to have a label. I wanted to have a label, but I didn't want to have a traditional label. I was like, why do I have to call my business a design studio or an agency? Why don't I just say I'm running a web design and development label that that's designed to not just do headway stuff, but just designed to help people create beautiful things, whether it's a website or whether it's art or whether it's music. And I thought, well, there's nothing really in a name at my level as a freelancer and as a sole proprietor of a business other than what goes on my business card or what goes on my invoice or what my URL is. And then I also thought about how much people sweat their company names and their logos, and I always had an issue with that because I was like, well, look at Google. You look at Google's logo from the 90s, and it's one of the ugliest things I'd ever seen. It was like different colored letters. It looked like something that somebody would put together on the front of a fridge with magnets, and Google is misspelled. It's actually spelled Googol. It's a number, and they only picked the LE because they couldn't get the other domain. So Google is a, and now we like their logo because it's so deeply ingrained in our culture that we're like, oh yeah, different colored letters for each letter in Google. But that's just it's kind of a GeoCities old school kind of design that has been refined and has become subcultural, that Google is now in the dictionary as a verb. And it's if they can take something and make it all about their product and not about their name, and then the name just kind of does its own work, then I see no reason why I can't have a kind of quirky, funny, flavorful company name like this. And people get a kick out of it. I've also gotten some emails from marketers that are like, I didn't really understand when I first got to your site. I know that you make plugins now because I say it right up front of my page, right. But maybe you would do better if you just did this designs. I was like, yeah, maybe I should have chosen to go that way, but right now I just like the way this sounds, and I also really I'm dedicated to making musical tools, and something that I'm going to be sharing with the Headway community and just the web community in general is ways to apply the same kind of logic that frameworks like WordPress and Headway, they make things easier. There are tools that need to be built, and I plan on building them, that will make the synthesis of music easier, and maybe that'll just grow into my business, and maybe that'll just grow into a label, and that won't be Ginger Soul Records. But right now, it just seemed to click for some kind of reason, and now people get a kick out of it. They don't really understand it, but that's just part of its mystique at this point. I ain't going back. You know, I already got all the logo drawn out. I got the URL, got my email, got my Skype. It's all Ginger Soul, and you know, I think it'll stay that way. Now, and it's also, you know, it's been great because it's informed this kind of theme, motif for my site. You know, I could have a background video on my website of somebody with thick rimmed glasses, you know, smiling and working on a Mac, you know, and just writing in their cute little notebook or something and going for a bike ride. You know, like I'm a designer,
Right.
but I figured like, oh man, this thing informs my tagline. This thing informs the names of my blocks. This thing, when I'm doing demos, I can put pictures of, you know, Erykah Badu and Dilla on there and sort them around. Like it's breathed this kind of life into a business that I think is often very stale. I think a lot of like companies are just like, well, we need a sans serif cute font and a name like you know, Excelsior or whatever, and then that's it, and that's our startup. And I'm like, I don't want to play that game. I want this to have a little bit more bite and a little bit more intrigue. You know, the other day I was testing my SEO out / just being vain, and I googled Ginger Soul Records as an image search because I wanted to see actually if I had somebody else is about to do an interview in a couple of weeks, and I wanted to get a headshot, and I was like, well, do I have any headshots online? Because I don't take a whole lot of pictures of myself. So,
No selfies.
And I looked at the image results for Ginger Soul Records, and of course, all of my screenshots from my Vimeo videos are up on top. But as you go down the page, there's pictures of redheads, and there's pictures of record albums, and I realized that this collage that I saw in front of me was kind of everything that I wanted this to stand for. I wanted there to be a little bit of tech, I wanted there to be a little bit of funk and soul, and I wanted there to be a little bit of this like kind of redheadedness about it, because you know, redheads aren't, you know, if you think about it, a redhead person ain't the most soulful person in the world, and it's like it's almost like a contradiction. So there's a lot surrounding the name, and I've gotten to explore that all just by explaining this right now, but that's kind of where it started, and that's where it stands.
Well, we had our man Simply Red, pretty soulful dude.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned Erykah Badu, and then you said Dilla. Is that Jay Dilla?
Yes.
Man, come on, that dude's from my town. What you know about that guy?
Yeah. Well, I've always had a proclivity for, you know, beats. I listened to hip hop in high school. I was a DJ in college. I listened to house music then, and I certainly got to know the work of some of the producers behind all of our, you know, all of our most cherished artists. And Dilla is no exception, and I think he, you know, I still think he's the greatest hip hop producer who ever lived. And you know, it was great to meet you. I remember on our first phone call we talked about him, because a lot of people don't really know that he was instrumental, no pun intended, in the careers of Common and Tribe Called Quest and Busta Rhymes and you know, Slum Village and all these artists, you know, depended on him, and what he did, I think, almost better than anyone, which is something that I kind of wanted to do. He didn't make tools for people to make music, but he made music that challenged the status quo, but was still groovy enough to be successful. He and he knew exactly what he wanted to make. He didn't really like have a, you know, you don't a lot of people don't know who he is because he didn't, you know, do the whole big, you know, I'm a celebrity kind of thing. I mean, he was just chilling with members of the Roots, and just they knew who he was, and he wasn't trying, you know, he wasn't trying to really big it up, I imagine, because he was just too busy in the creative process. And that's kind of where I stand. I mean, I'm not going to compare myself to Dilla because, you know, I don't think that that's really fair to him, but he's an inspiration as far as just the little ways that you can bend a beat or bend an art to make it yours. And you know, I feel like if I'm going to make a mark on this industry, you know, I need to bend things a little bit and to challenge, you know, the status quo just like that. But you know, I still have a lot to learn about his career. He was so prolific that I could probably just go and listen to another album of instrumentals that I haven't heard. But his work was it really helped me think about deconstructing an art form and making very small adjustments to a particular part of it that can have a huge impact. Like his beats were stuttered in a way that, or he introduced a lot of like what we now know as like glitch, like where it just wasn't like a constant rhythm. It was a little bit different, but that. I guess as a father of the neo soul movement, I think that I owe it to him and other artists of his ilk to kind of pay tribute to them through whatever kind of art that I am a master of or that I am becoming good at. And I definitely plan on making some of these like music tools that will incorporate some of his style and some of his rhythms and some of his patterns into there. But for now, it's a far cry from the Headway world, but it's something that just like is I want to be an underpinning of all of this.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, that is a perfect leadway into what we're going to jump on next. Let's do the screen share thing and let's get started with talking about these blocks and visualizing. Sure. And go ahead and let's start building the site out, show everybody how simple it is to manipulate this stuff.
Sure. So you can see my screen right now?
Not yet.
Okay. Make sure I got it turned on.
Okay, I got it now.
Should see my homepage right now.
Yep, I got it.
Okay. So this is gingersoulrecords.com. It is, I guess this is about the 4th version of it. And this is the version that was built almost exclusively with my own plugins because I wanted to, be able to sell these blocks in the same place where we could see what they did. So this is this video is playing and with the text on top of it, and the text fades in when you refresh. This is a Soul Sections block, and Soul Sections is designed to make the process of combining very common text and imagery pairings on the web easier to build and make them responsive. The navigation up top is controlled by Soul Nav, which was really just designed at first to provide an alternative to Headway's default mobile navigation, which is currently a drop-down list. So I had seen a lot of menus that had this kind of off-canvas navigation going on with a little hamburger icon so that you could, access them wherever you were on the page, and you can just get to where you got to go, as opposed to needing to find, one, Price is Right style strip of menu. And, that's how you can navigate to anywhere on the site, no matter what device you're on. And, when I built this site with other Soul Sections, I tried to tell a story about where I was coming from and what I believe about the web, and introduce Headway, and these are all just Soul Sections. With I found that there was a very common theme with the current state of advertising and communication on the web, where you have like this very short and sweet, hard to avoid tagline. And I just grabbed this kind of formatting from Apple. You have your big tagline, you have your supplementary tagline here, you have some supporting text, you have a call to action, and you have an image. And sometimes you'll have a title as well that will kind of sit, up and just give you a visual anchor on what's being talked about. There are some customizations here, but I had a lot of fun just tucking different kinds of components into these different fields. And these are all Soul Sections, so they're designed to be responsive first, so that when you bring the browser in, they will just settle nicely. And the first reason I actually built Soul Sections was because hero images, if you draw a hero image out, and you have, I'm just going to use OmniGraffle to kind of illustrate this for a second.
Dave, explain hero image and why it's called that.
Yeah, hero image is usually a full screen um, background image that kind of takes I would say, the blinding whiteness out of web pages, and gives you this kind of like nice magazine style background, so you can direct the eye inwards and focus on a particular set of instructions, or words, or a claim. They've become very popular recently. Most old school websites were, well, as minimalism has started people have started to understand the power of putting less information, crowd the page less, and just have it be nice and spacious and easy to breathe, and so that your eye is automatically drawn to the center. So hero image really makes that easy, so that you aren't just you're not drawn in different directions. You're not like looking here for a sidebar and a bunch of social media links, and you're looking over here with a bunch of other stuff. It's just like big beautiful imagery and a simple message, and it's calming, and you see it just used everywhere as a way to kind of focus attention onto that. One of the reasons I built soul sections in the first place was because hero imagery, once it got shrunk down to phone size, say I draw my phone here and I lock it up. If you have a hero image on a desktop and you have words on that hero image, once you shrink it down, you're going to have trouble, seeing what's on there, and a lot of times, like, you're not going to be able to fit all of what your hero image encompassed on there, especially if your typography isn't being responsive. So I thought, well, why not put like a different kind of image there, maybe having your text sit underneath it, or sit above it. And when I thought about that, I thought, all right, how am I going to headwayify this thing? Because I need to give people a way to choose what kind of style their thing is going to have. Because these kind of shifts, I'm messing this to the... These kind of shifts in style, like putting text above, or putting text on the right, or putting text below, require different HTML. They require different CSS. So what Headway allowed me to do was have users select a section style for this, and then it will subsequently draw out the HTML and CSS to match, so that you can actually toggle them between above and below. So you can see that these are like text text content and such on the left side, image on the right, but when you go down, you don't want that because it's not going to fit, so you need to push one above the other. Or you need to make a sandwich and put the image in between the tagline and the text, which is what this does. And that just fits together so much more nicely, and makes it that much easier to toggle that. The other two blocks are jQuery, like I mentioned, is in the background of this build. Controlling responsive layout, and controlling a bunch of the JavaScript that allows me to insert stuff. Like I have some JavaScript kicking in that'll take all my navigation and all my login stuff and put it right into this off-canvas area. So we're not crowding this small bar on mobile with login information. We have shopping cart information. We have user information about whether I'm logged in or logged out. And the last one is soul type. So you'll notice that the responsive typography is something that there's not a whole lot of resources on the web about it, because people who care about typography and people who care about code tend to be two different people. I just happen to be to start from one of those disciplines and go into the other. And what I realized too, just like this example over here, is that this text, which is designed to be big and bold and captivating, just cannot fly down here, but you still need to make it readable, and still need to make it proportionally larger than its supporting cast here. So what I did building soul type was just allowed you to take, I'm going to go back to this site, which I always show when I'm demoing soul type, and it allows you to kind of construct a visual scale based on what you want to have, like a desktop range of small to large, and then something that's where the gap between the smallest and largest is a little bit less. And then this is just something I use to get the values.
So, oh, okay. Let me interrupt, but I want to jump in and ask, without your blocks, what would Headway do with the text and the images like you when you scrolled over to a phone size?
Well, Headway currently has just in the last few versions released support for rems, which is a unit of measure that is a relative unit of measure. So you can still do it, and you can still do this all. This is all just CSS, but my job, as it's always been with Headway, is to make it so that you can just turn it on and then adjust it, as opposed to needing to write all that code out yourself.
So that's what I wanted to get to. So
yeah.
The difference is with Soul Type, the code is already built into the block.
Yeah, it's built into a preset that I've made available, and then you can go into there, and if you want something to be a little bit larger up here and a little bit smaller down there, you can do it. Now, there's as much of a learning curve for that to wrap your head around it, but at least you have a starting point. And what's really important and what's really great about Headway 3.7 with the preset functionality is that anybody, if I'm building a website for somebody else, if I'm building a website as a function, and me, Dave Bloom, building a website as a function of my practice, and I find, and they, I work with the client to get to the point where we have a great typographic scale on all devices and everything looks nice and clean, I can export that in a matter of seconds to a file that somebody else in the Headway community can import and get the same thing. If to do that somewhere else, I used to go to other people's websites and just look at what sizes their fonts were, and that's, of course, a lonely road. Yeah, and I don't know how to, I don't know how to even start to do that now, but it was just it was an understanding that font and type size had to be scaled and it had to be responsive, but there's a lot that goes into that, and there's a lot of detail that goes into it, and I'm still learning. So those 4 blocks, Soul Section, Soul Nav, jQuery, and Soul Type, are my 4 horsemen, and they do almost all the legwork with any site. And I'm slowly but surely building out presets for each. And I did a demo on my demo on my homepage makes use of presets, and I can provide those to people if they're interested in messing around with them. But what I see is there's going to be a huge library of these presets, and you're going to be able to go to a showcase of sites and not just say, oh, that's a pretty site, I wish I could do something like that. Right. You're going to go to a site and it's going to have a little button that says download get this exact thing. Yeah. And then you put it up on yours and it works, and then you just go about your day. So that's the idea behind all this, and Headway, they put out a few templates that extend that logic to the whole site in terms of being able to import stuff, and I'm happy just to be a part of doing that too, because I think that the most important thing to understand about these blocks is that the settings are very complex at first glance, especially again to a Headway user, but the power of being able to preset them means that you can load in something that's well done and well thought out and just really trimmed down, and then you can make small changes to it so you can learn how it works, as opposed to needing to start from a blank slate, because you don't have to anymore. You don't have to start from a blank page. Now we are going to, but you're going to see that we can use presets in some instances to accelerate the workflow quite considerably.
I swear you keep answering my questions before I ask them.
You're my best.
But that's cool, man. Look, so basically what you're saying is, as a web designer, there are certain building block foundations, if you will, that you repeat over and over and over for a site. And with these blocks, with jQuery, Soul Nav, Soul Type, and Soul Section, it has the fundamental foundation so that you're not wasting a lot of time writing that code.
Yeah, and it's also just a way for me to be able to extend, my experience and my knowledge of JavaScript and CSS, so that you're not just getting, somebody else's preset, but you're getting somebody else's experience.
Yes.
And this is a vehicle with which I can, I've seen people using Soul Section's video backgrounds and they wouldn't have the slightest idea on how to embed a video background or how to create the different kinds of file types that you need to create. But all I got to do is record, a few 10-minute videos and give them a link to have a zip that they can install, and they're there. And that is, I mean, that doesn't just speak to Headway's, brilliance, or WordPress's brilliance, but you think about the way software is developed in the world right now, the way that apps are made. I mean, this blows the door open on how people can start to, I mean, everybody's got an app idea. I'm sure everybody came up with Uber in their heads before Uber popped off. Yeah. So, like, if you actually give the people, I give the people the ability to create responsive, dynamic web interfaces. But I'm not going to stop there, and I don't think anybody else should either, and start to, find ways to do more acrobatics in terms of code, in terms of accessing data in a database, retrieving it, deleting it, creating it, and all of the complex things that code can do, including creating social networks and all that kind of stuff. If those tools become things that regular people can wield, we're going to have a much more connected society, and I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting innovations that are going to come out of that. And that's enough work for me to just base a career on. So I'm going to show you, I haven't had a website planned out for you, but I would be happy to show you how to get started drawing these blocks and how to import presets so that you can really see this principle unfold and be able to use it on your own sites.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so what I'm going to start with is just show you my my basic setup. I usually open 3 tabs. I have this hosted locally. The site's called Ginger Soul Slate. It's just kind of a sandbox that I use to doodle and build blocks in. I have my Headway grid here, and I have the output, which is very familiar to Headway users. Nothing there. What I'm going to do is, on my site, and I've alluded to this before, I have a template called the Reset template that allows you to kind of undo all of Headway's default settings, like any of this padding, the font family, and just sets you up with an absolutely clean slate, so that anything that Headway has done in your interest to accelerate your design is kind of just wiped clean, so that we can start with a clean slate. And if I activate this guy, I think we should have a nice clean grid. But if we have a grid that shows up here, I will wipe it clean. Okay, so now we have a full width grid, and we're fluid. The color scheme here that you're going to see when I'm drawing these blocks is brought to you by a StyleBot extension for Chrome, which allows you to actually insert CSS for any website. And Headway's grids, they're a website. This is a web page. This is HTML. You can inspect the elements if you wanted to, and you can see that all of this is just a document. Now, so what this does is it makes it, for me, the white on white of Headway's interface was a little bit too much. I preferred the older way, and I just decided to go in and have a bunch of fun styling stuff. So that's why you're going to see things looking like this. So I'm going to draw a Soul Sections block. I've already got these plugins installed, and I still got to put some information in the overview here, but this is probably a slightly older version. So the first thing we're going to do is just put an image in there and maybe put some text on top of it. Soul Section has a lot of settings, but it has essentially them divided up into what goes into the block, the text and imagery that goes into it, and then how to style it below and above a certain breakpoint, which is just a width in pixels. And this is a pretty common breakpoint between what mobile devices tend to be and what larger devices like laptops and tablets and desktops tend to be.
Tell me, Dave, why do you draw a block the full width of the fluid screen?
Sure. I came across a methodology that was called Mobile First several years ago, and there was a book actually written by a really great designer called Luke Robolewski, who published it, and I have started to use the Headway grid as not necessarily a one-to-one representation about what's going to go onto the site, but rather well, let's just say it's easier to build a website for mobile and then style it for desktop than it is to do the reverse. So most websites built in Headway were built for desktop so that people can maintain that kind of one-to-one relationship. But then when you try to stuff all of that content that you've put up above the fold, or up in your separate columns um, into mobile, you can run into some problems. Sometimes you can just have them all maxed out at 100%. But that just is really stacking things up when maybe you want to have a different approach. Maybe you want to have two things sitting next to each other on mobile. So I just see this whole grid as a big phone, and I draw my blocks like that because when I draw them 100%, I can make them as small as I want using jQuery. Like I said, the row containers can get resized conditionally. So I always draw my site in these rows. And then if I need to make it smaller and need to make this one, 50% on a different device, I can do that. But this one, the grid starts to take a different meaning here. It's really just like a repository. It's where I'm putting all of the pieces that go in this layout, and then I make magic happen with those later. So,
Okay.
Did that answer the question
No
for you?
doubt. No doubt.
All right, cool. All right, so if I just went to, this is a repeater. And if I just went to the image section of this, and I don't want this to take too much time because I know we're already an hour deep, but what I can do is just select a simple rectangular image with this, put it in there, save this layout, and I already have a responsive hero image ready. This is, of course, the aspect ratio is pushing this down a bit, but this is actually, there's a lot going on here. In terms of the way that this image is formatted, what can go on top of it. I can put text on top of it, or a tagline. Maybe a tagline goes here, and we're not going to have this be styled in a particular way because we essentially just hit the reset button. But this is going to center it right in the middle, and we're going to be able to animate this. We're going to be able to put this where we want it. We can tuck it into any one of the four corners. There's a lot we can do with this block. But again, like I said, the presets are probably going to be a bit more powerful than anything else. So I could start instead by going to find an import, a block settings import file from my computer that I actually saved from the demo that I did. So if I navigate and you get a first-person look into the file structure of Dave Bloom, go look in a folder, and this is a file you can get from my site, and on demand I can happily provide you with these, and you can just have these different little JSON files, which means JavaScript Object Notation, which is the language that these blocks kind of speak in the background, and just grab a file, import its settings. It imports the image, it imports the block settings, and then you can find that it actually has stuff written here. It has a tagline here, and it has the image imported and stuff like that. So if I save this and go over to my build, I'm going to find that, we're going to have some animations already built in. We're going to have these different sections flowing in nicely. The type is still unstyled. This is a browser default serif, but we have a really nice, staggered animation here that in a matter of seconds. So it's only a matter of drawing these blocks out more that we can, just start to build a website with this thing. And if I draw soul type and jQuery, which are utilities, so I tend to just park them at the bottom of the screen. We're going to be able to import these presets for these as well, and have nice type styling. So if I open up soul type and I go to its config and import, and I just go grab the soul type setting from this presets file, I import it. This will succeed, and then I'm going to have all of its settings, which are many, all filled out with nice selectors that'll give me a start on this responsive typographic scale. So if I go back here, we're already going to have sole sections text in there. Now when we let's see, we gotta do a little bit of making the opacity of the body 1 for now. We're off the cuff here, man.
Hey, listen, do you have to put those blocks in the lower left? Could you put them
No, you don't. Actually, they are. So what I realized about Headway's block API is that blocks can act as settings, and they don't have to necessarily just be display elements. Now, they are still subject to the rules of the grid. There are still rows that surround this. There are still columns. If I opened up the code here, you're actually going to be able to go down to the bottom and see that there's a 10 pixel tall row here, and that's just because I haven't turned off the block margins. But this is where jQuery is. But the block API, the rules with which blocks interact with Headway means they can carry their own JavaScript and they can carry their own CSS with them. That's very important because you need, for example, with a navigation block, you need the navigation block to come with the hover CSS and the hover intent CSS and the toggling kind of stuff, so it can tell Headway, hey, I can do this, that, and the other thing. So when I get drawn in the grid, execute my stuff and display me, right? Okay. But with jQuery, you can also say hide me. So when jQuery gets drawn in here and when SolType gets drawn in here, I say, all right, these guys are packing all of their capabilities, but when the page loads, just make sure they're hidden. So one thing jQuery can do is what's called a block margin reset. Let me move you out of the way here, so that you can actually take that margin off, and because Headway gives a default bottom margin of 10 pixels to all blocks, so this will just turn that off. So that the blocks by default have a margin of 0, and now I'm scrolling right now, I can't actually reach that little space. Okay. So now we have a completely responsive animated hero image that is matching the height of the window, and this, there are splash pages that probably have less going on than this, and so it's just a matter of adding some navigation to this, adding maybe some content to go on another page, and then we have ourselves a pretty functioning website.
So let's draw the navigation. Let's draw, sure, say, a footer and another sole section.
Sure, you got it.
When you do that, explain how jQuery is going to talk to each one of those sections.
Okay. And you mean jQuery, right?
jQuery.
Yeah. I told you I should have named it something different. I should have named it like Soul Controller or something like that. But maybe I'll do that for the next version. So yeah, we'll do that. Let me just upload a preset first, so that I don't have to bore you with going through all these settings, because we got to keep this pretty manageable. But so here's our little Soul Nav in the sandbox. We import it. And I did this in my tutorial video, but I'm glad I got a chance to take a little bit more time and explain it. If I save this, so I'll make sure this is going to work. This already comes bundled with a little home image, and of course we got to go back and just like any navigation block, we got to marry it with a sample menu. So here's just a dummy menu that just doesn't really go anywhere, but just displays the items, and all we got to do is tick Soul Nav, just like you would with a navigation block, and then we will see our links up here.
Okay.
And as you can see, like with my site, the same thing applies. This will turn into a little icon, and we'll have that working that way. Now these are there. You just can't really see them because it's black on black, but you get the idea.
Now,
so
your text is up in the upper right hand corner. Where did you input to say I want this in the upper right? Because I know on Headway you can choose left, center, right with their navigation. Even with your plugin Soul Nav, you can choose that.
Yeah, that's a text alignment. Okay. But what Soul Nav is comprised of is actually it's actually like 6 different areas. Well, maybe 7 actually. I keep on counting the original place you drew it. What Soul Nav does is it creates it wraps the entire page in a wrapper, and it also puts a nav bar there as well. So this this is what happens. You usually just have a white wrap inside of the body. Now I call it the sole nav wrap, which actually holds both the nav bar, which is all this stuff, and the areas which need to stay fixed, and the inner, which actually holds the white wrap. So this is everything that gets drawn on your grid goes here. Sole nav is an exception to this because when you scroll down, the off-canvas areas have to keep their fixed positioning. So the nav bar, if we actually look at this, and I'm just going to use this element inspector so you can kind of see as I mouse over these different sections of the bar. Here's the bar, and the bar has 3 different sections at each breakpoint. There's 2 breakpoints, so it's really 6 different ones. It has the left area, the center area, and the right. And you can give these different areas different sizes, different paddings, and you can also choose to put the navigation that you chose here into any of these sections. You can put it in here, and here, and here, or you can also put it off canvas, which, you know, there are actually rectangles on either side of this page and above it that can hold content, and normally you'd use those for the mobile view. Okay. So this is just hanging out here, and it's fixed. So if once we put some stuff down here, I'll scroll down, and you'll see that this will follow you down. So you can choose to put the reason is you want to put the navigation in the nav bar above the breakpoint so people can see it, and that's a design decision. It's pretty common now. Nav goes in the upper right, whether it's in an off-canvas area or not. And then, but belowhand, you know that those 4 items would get squished in here. Even if you made their type really small, that would be even worse. So you want to have them accessible and persistent, but out of the way. So all I did in SolNav to put these in these 2 respective areas was choose below the breakpoint. I want to be in this right off-canvas area. And as you can see, there are 6 other options. One of which is just keep it where you drew it, which just put it right in here. But usually it gets shuttled elsewhere. And then above the breakpoint, you just put it in the right nav bar area. And you can put anything you want in these areas. You can put navigation in there. You can put contact forms in there. If you wanted, to instead of a hamburger icon below the breakpoint, you can just put a little envelope and have a contact form sitting in that off-canvas area, so you can make sure that people have a quick and easy way to contact you. You can put images in there and linked images so that you can go home. So, I built this, like I said, just to replace the default navigation, but then I realized, well, I also want to start exploring ways that you can make the mobile experience just comparable to the desktop experience, and that you don't have to go scrolling up and down the page and wearing your thumb out, trying to find a link to another page or a contact form, or maybe even the checkout button. Like if people want to buy something from you, make it persistent, make it quick. So that's how the Sol Nav works. I'm going to draw another Sol Sections block and show you a little bit about how jQuery can help you define the widths like you asked. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to again import a preset, and this will be the right image. So Sol Section can put the image behind the content, but it can also put the image to the right, the left, top, bottom, or between the text content that you enter. So once I save this and we scroll down, we're going to see that we actually have an animated responsive image coming in. So this is set to has a particular selection called the section style, which is pretty self-explanatory. Image on right, you can put it behind it, on top, bottom, left, between, or you can just isolate if you want to just either the image or the text. Below the breakpoint, it's actually putting the image on top, because the right to left split would cause these words to get squished again. So once we get below our breakpoint, we're actually going to be putting this right there. And you control the alignment and such. So let's say that I wanted, I didn't want these both to go full width. Let's say I wanted my my hero image to go halfway, and my and this one maybe to go a little bit smaller. Or maybe we can just split these two 50-50 just out of curiosity. It might not be the most design-friendly decision I ever made, but we can try it.
Okay.
So I'm going to first give these aliases. so that they can be targeted by. They have IDs, but they're very like gobbledygook IDs. I want to target them with jQuery, so I'll just set this as my hero.
And while you're doing that, the gaps between your sections, does that matter? Because I see how fluid and flush that your images are to one another, but yet you have gaps on the grid that has gaps. And
vertically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the reason I space these out is not just for like readability and usability, but also because I don't want these to. If you put things right next to each other, sometimes Headway's grid logic will put them in the same row. And because I have control over my rows at different sizes, I want them to be obviously distinct. So I don't want there to be any question. Now, the grid is finicky sometimes, but this just makes it beyond the shadow of a doubt that anything will be misinterpreted. And this is going to have a different row than this one, and this will have a different row than this one. So that when I go down and start configuring jQuery, there won't be any question of which row gets the styles that I set for it. So the first thing we're going to do is quickly explore the concept of breakpoints. Now, when I first built jQuery, and this is still the default setting even though I often modify it, I provided like 4 different bounds based on pixel sizes and common sizes of different devices to apply rules to. But what I find is that this actually really works just fine if you only use 2 of these boundaries, and you can nullify a certain set of boundaries just by putting zeros there. So right now I'm just going to consider that handhelds in my mind are just going to be everything between 0 and 767 pixels in width, and tablets will encompass everything else. So I got to change this value to something super high, like 10,000. So now we know that for our purposes right now, this could be anything. This could be breakpoint boundary A, breakpoint boundary B, but I wanted you to have a relationship to be able to designate behaviors. So now we know that if we want our our hero image to be 50% wide above the 768 mark, all we got to do is reference it, which we can do by saying alias my hero and giving its containing row a width. Now, before I do that, I want to show you that indeed every block has 2 containers that are section tags. And so here's the block. You can see it has a block ID, its class is block, it is obviously a block. And then it has its 2 containers, the column and the row. And you can see that these don't really have anything specific, right? No specific identifiers other than this class, but this class can be different if you have more than one wrapper. The rows in that wrapper get that row 2 class. So it's not a unique class. It's not like an ID. So we have to find the parent row, which jQuery will, to this alias that has the alias going on. And if I save this, and we go, we are obviously above our breakpoint at this point, and we'll get, let's make sure that if we actually type in 50%, this will resize it to be half the screen. Now this one, nothing will happen with that one. But we could just as soon give that one the same treatment. We can add them here. And then both of their containing rows are going to be 50%, so they'll sit next to each other. And, this one might be a little squished in. But you already can see that there's a lot of, like, first of all, it's a lot of different HTML that needs to be written to do this. It's a lot of media queries that need to be written to do this. And this is my way of taking all of that logic and putting it into a form where you modify 2 or 3 fields. And this can, you can have a lot of fun with this. You can explore different kinds of layouts. Like maybe if you want these to float differently, you can have them float right instead, and go the other way. And you can have this like kind of split thing going on. And then as you go down, their handheld styles were not adjusted, so they will still go right back to where you want. Now, in order to do this with HTML and CSS, you'd have to put your HTML and CSS in really remarkably different places. You have to do a lot of calculations for that. But the way that this works is that it just kind of knows what to spit out when you do it. So you can have a lot of fun like finding the right layout, and you can also find the right section style. Say you go to your client, and your client's like, well, I want the font on the left. That's fine. Let's take it out of this logic so that only the hero gets cut in half. We go back to its block options, and all we have to do is change the section style to put the image on the left, and everything will just work. Go down here, phone's on the left, and we might want to change the image width or make it a little bit closer to our stuff. But being able to pull down from a form as opposed to writing a bunch of different HTML is very powerful, and it's a matter of being thoughtful and figuring out what looks right, and without having to spend hours and hours of time retooling your stuff and getting lost in a bunch of code. So I'm just going to throw in a footer just for footer's sake, because what's the site without a footer? And you can use soul sections for footers, but I would probably, I'll just start by might as well use one headway block, right? Yes. And that'll show there. And, now it's just a matter of, here's our footer. Now in order to make an actual website, we can go back to jQuery, just ditch this setting. We now know that we have that power, and we can also, not just make floating and width, but we can do padding and margin and positioning, so that you can have like really interesting effects, layering things on top of each other. And what I do on a lot of my sites is I will give a block a class, like let's say you can give blocks custom classes in their config areas. So it's, if I want to say left 50, and I go to jQuery and I say left 50 is going to be 50% and float to the left, and you can probably tell what's going to happen here. So you can actually like come up with this this system of how to lay out your content. Like say you want all your page contents to be 60% and over to the left side, you can just, or floating to the left, you can just give all those blocks that class and not have to go crazy with jQuery settings. And then, eventually, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Can you write left 50 dot left the word and then 50 50 in that same sector?
Yeah, I believe so. Let's try it. Left, like this.
Yeah.
I think that this CSS class should respect that. And we got to put, in order to select the CSS class, you got to put a dot in front of it. That's the syntax. So it'll float left 50%. Yep, that worked. And then what we see if we actually inspect this is that the row now, which didn't have anything added to it other than this, now has all these styles inside. Yeah. And that when we resize our window, those styles are going to change. They're going to get reset to what they originally were. So a lot of control over the layout. And I don't expect people to, these kind of settings, you can understand now why jQuery didn't make it into extend, and I don't blame them. This is a lot to look at. Yeah. This is a lot to look at. This is a lot to learn, and a lot of different, you don't have me peeking over your shoulder, walking you through it and answering your questions. I do my best to document it, but I can do better. Yeah. I just want to show you now how I would just make another page. And you know what? Let's keep our left 50 class. I'm going to keep our left 50 in there so we can actually see how we could style this for one of our child pages. So let's save that.
Now for all those that don't know, including myself sometimes, a child page is a duplicate of a page already built?
Well, I would just say a child page of a site is anything that's not the home. But if, let's say we wanted to add a page that was just called About. So About Content. Sometimes when I need dummy content, I head on over to HTML Ipsum, which is a free site that just lets you click on stuff and it copies it, and you just go ahead and paste it in. There you go. let's make that. Let's just close that off. So if I publish this, I need to go add it to my menu real quick, and then we're going to be able to visit it and style its layout. So let's get rid of you, and let's just add you. Put that up top. Save it. And now what I would do if I was happy with the way that my site looked in this case, say this was my whole layout, maybe there's another one here, then I would usually copy the whole thing over to the single layout and go from there. So I just want to make sure I got all my blocks in here. Yeah, I do. Okay, good. So single is currently inheriting the layout from the front page. So if we actually clicked on About, it would bring us to something that looked exactly like this, which is not what we want. So what I would do is I would edit it, I would clone everything, which includes sol type and jQuery and sol nav, and then I would just take out the guts of the site so that I could add something like a content block in here. So let's take our sol sections away from this layout and just draw a content block. I'll set it to default behavior, which should pull in a couple of posts from the back end. Oh, I'm sorry, that should pull in the page from the back end. So since it's set to default behavior, and there's our content, and we can see our nav is up there and our footer is there. So what I'm going to do real quick is, so that we can actually see the navigation, I'm going to go to the home page and just give the nav bar a background color. Now, since I'm mirroring it, I want to apply across the site. So, didn't actually make it over there, sorry. Because we're going to have this kind of whiteness, and the contrast ain't going to be too good. You can control the background color of the sol nav bar above the breakpoint just by tweaking this to whatever value you want. I'll make it just black for now. If I refresh, now the sol nav is set to be fixed, so it's going to cut off a little bit. But I can always just make its positioning relative. I'm sorry, it's going to be absolute, but I can make it relative so that it sits inside the document and pushes everything below it down. And if we come back home, we're actually going to see that this is pushing our hero image down, but that looks alright. So now we got our connection. The last thing I wanted to do is show you how you can use the jQuery over here. If you remember the class, left 50, you can actually just give that to other blocks so that you have this kind of layout system, responsive layout system already in place. jQuery is being mirrored onto this layout, so everything is cool there. And all we got to do is give this that left 50 class, and it will occupy half of the space. And same thing goes, it'll go full width under here. If I wanted to, maybe I don't want that butting up against the side, I just go back to my jQuery controls over here and just give left 50 a little bit of padding. So say 3%. That's better. And you could add another block down there, just have your feed occupy that. Opportunities are pretty much endless there. So the thing is, here's where I'm going with this. This whole site can be exported as a template. So if I wanted this to just be like pretending this was my full site, I could go back here, go to Headway Templates, export current template, and just call it demo. Do this. I don't need to select its image is optional, but if I exported this, I'm going to start downloading this file. And now if I go to a completely different Headway installation, I can take this file and I can upload it so that, let's say this is the template that's active right now.
Right.
So if I go ahead and activate something else, like the base, and I delete what we just did, then I look at my site and, you know, no more buddies, right?
Right.
But now I can go ahead and just install the template that I just downloaded. It'll work for a bit. Looks like it's successful. Go back and refresh. Oop. Gotta activate it. There we go. And we're good.
Wow.
And this will work all across the board. So I build websites, I export template, I share it with the community, and as long as they got these blocks in place, they can do whatever they want. And you know, if you can take one site that you build for a client, and they paid you fairly, you know, maybe a couple $1,000, and then you know, maybe you draw a different comp that looks, you know, suspiciously like this other site you've built, and maybe a client finds you because they like a site that you've built. I've had plenty of business where people are like, I love what you did for client X, can you do that for us? I'm like, yes, I can. So,
I'll have it
so
ready for
you
you in
export
10
the
minutes.
template, you switch the images out, yeah, and then you say, all right, well, it only took me 20 hours to do it, you know. So, but this is also a great way just to share designs with people and to really take, you know, the goal here is you didn't see me writing any code,
Yeah.
except, you know, so you can, as long as somebody is schooled on this stuff and they have, you know, me to lean on in terms of support, you can build websites. You can take all the, you know, the pain out of building websites, and there's still plenty of room to write a custom code block or to, you know, customize something with the CSS. And everything here is, you know, controllable either through block options or through Headway's visual editor. So if you didn't like this font, you know, you can just change it to, you know, Helvetica or whatever you want it to be. So I hope that was a good starter video. I definitely I'm glad that I got the time to really explain a bunch of this stuff and kind of answer your questions along the way.
So where's Headway going? Not Headway, but Ginger Soul Record, Dave Bloom going next with the plugins using Headway.
One thing I really want to get down with is a presentational framework that I've been really enjoying called Reveal.js. Now, Reveal.js is a presentational kind of PowerPoint in your browser framework built by a man named Hakeem El-Attab. And he is a very intelligent guy who has made a framework that you can go and just navigate and do kind of a PowerPoint style thing here. And this kind of piqued my interest because I'm like, you know, we got a whole world of office workers using PowerPoint, maybe using Keynote, maybe using Google Slides or something like that. And the prevalence of sliders as a content presentation tool, and of course the prevalence of slide decks, like this one, you know, as a way to illustrate a concept in a business setting or to explain something, you know, SlideShare is huge. I thought, all right, I need to Headwayify this thing. But I took it a step further. And I thought, all right, well, I can take a content block and I can put each of its, you know, this is going to be a bunch of dummy text for you, but if I put a quote-unquote page inside each inside of a slide, I can actually have a website that feels like it's the fastest website on earth, or it's an app. There's no page refresh, there's no AJAX calls, there's just instant page loads. And if I can like wrap my head around how this slider works, where I click on an item and it goes to a different page, I could have a website that is, you know, super fast. And if I could, you know, find a way to make it look cool and have like interesting transition styles, then we're starting to give people tools with which to really build appy feeling websites. This is all one page. It's one content block that's pulling 4 different posts into it, and those posts are called letter, resume, portfolio, and references. And the reason why I gave them these names was because a site like this could work great as an online resume. You say, you know, at davebloom.com, I'm looking for a job. Here's my stuff. It can work for a proposal. It doesn't have to work for a full-fledged site, but a microsite can make really great use of this because you can put anything in, you know, a slideshow or whatever you want it to be. So I'm your content block, and then you click to get to the different sections, and it's just right there. Now, and you can check this out if you go here. You can watch me build this thing. A slider, I still have uses for carousels and sliders, so I would like to. I've been looking at Ken Wheeler's Slick carousel. This guy's hilarious. He has like a whole repo full of like really funny named plugins. This one's called Slick. So I need one that can do everything that a carousel needs to do. If you need to have a little section tucked into the corner of your page, if you need to have variable width stuff, responsive sliders, this kind of stuff, gallery stuff, even having like a better fade animation. I've been working on putting this into something. I think I'm going to call this one like Soul Cycle, and this one will probably just be called Soul Power or something like that. I think that since these blocks that I've used here cover a wide range, or they each kind of cover their own sector of web development: navigation, typography, layout, animation. I do want to extend some of this to page and post content. So I'm working on a framework, a little mini CSS library that's called Soul Styles, which is just a set of CSS selectors, kind of like, almost like thinking about like Bootstrap, where you can add these classes to your divs, almost like a shortcode. And then it'll automatically have, instead of having to style the width with something like jQuery or style the animation with something like Soul Sections, all you'll have to do is really add a class to an element, and it will automatically perform an animation. So here's like an animation class that you just add to an element, and these are actually governing what you see here. These divs are just, they're animating in. And it probably is a little bit easier to see if I fade. See that little subtle animation? Yeah. So giving people animation tools that don't have to be within the realm of Headway, but this just has a little animation delay. It has a width. It has it's currently a work in progress, but to be able to add a class to an element is just as easy as adding a parameter to a shortcode. And if it can make it, do like a kind of staggered intro fade, then you give, you could add a class to any element with something like jQuery, and then have your whole page just, really smoothly and subtly kind of animating in, so that you don't have to count on Soul Sections animations to do it. I'm really trying to put more of this thinking and this functionality into this part of WordPress as opposed to this part of Headway. Right. This is great because what's so great about it is the import and export, as you've seen. But in order to make some of these things, some of these concepts a little bit more usable for even people who are using different frameworks. Maybe they're more comfortable with something else, but they still want to have staggered fade-in animations. You can still do it with this. So those are my three, next big projects. Of course, I am working on a music application, and it's nice timing that that I came out with this, because I wanted to put different parts of an app in different pages. And that way, when you get down to mobile, I mean, this thing, if you open this up on a mobile phone, it's just super slick. Right. There's no load. And I'm also making sure that it changes the URL every time you go to a different section, so that you can still refresh this and it'll go to, that part. So we're starting to do a little bit more hacking in that regard. I think that this will probably be ready before the end of the year, but I definitely look forward to getting feedback and putting out a few feelers for what people want with these frameworks, because I know that this thing will help you put on a better presentation at work. And if you can send your boss a PowerPoint presentation that they can use, that they can thumb through on their way to work, on the commute, then I think that that's something that just hasn't really been done well yet, and I'm really excited about that.
Well, brother, I want to say thank you for this wonderful, wonderful explanation, man, because
you're very welcome.
Your blocks have saved me a million and one times, and I'm still learning them. So, real quick, I know everybody see the recording and they see the URL and everything, but they can
Mm-hmm.
find you where?
Well, I'm at gingersoulrecords.com. If you want to reach out and you haven't yet plunged, you don't have to buy something to say hello. Of course, when you do, I'm happy to offer Skype help, and I'm starting to explore a chat room on this thing called HipChat, which people have been kind of going in and out of. But I would say start here, Ginger Soul Records contact. You can find me, my email address is right here, gingersoulrecords@gmail, and yeah, that would be the place to start if you're interested in learning more about the blocks, if you're interested in hiring me to help you fill in the gaps with the design, if you're just interested in asking me a few more questions that weren't answered here, or you want some of the presets that I've been working on, I'm happy to pass the piece and to, help you accelerate your builds here. And, I always I'm open to hearing about new block ideas. And if you find like a really great, jQuery plugin on the web, that would be great as a block. We can explore that together, and I can help you make it happen. So, um, yeah, that does that.
All right, cool. Now your blocks, you sell them all at individual prices. But what I didn't know, and I was getting ready to shoot you an email like, "Hey man, can I get a discount if I buy them all?" When I put them all in the shopping cart, the discount was already there, which was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. I've been exploring this fantastic plugin, Easy Digital Downloads, which Headway uses to sell. Oh, that ain't it. Easy Digital. There we go. So this is built by a buddy of mine, Pippin Williamson, who I told you earlier is the best WordPress plugin developer alive, I think. At least the most professional that I've ever met. He's a great guy. Talked to him at WordCamp NYC this year, and he's doing a lot of really great things with this framework. So this allows me to offer bundle discounts. It allows me to offer social discounts for sharing stuff. I do have a 10% volume discount on the store, and I can also, award points if you help out in the support forums, or if you, point out a major bug. You want to come visit us here and talk about questions you're having with stuff. Uh, questions about licensing. I'm more than happy to welcome new collaborators in. So yeah, I do offer the volume discount. I guess I need to make that a little bit more clear. So one
Yes.
thing that I learned that I'm working on right now is that I have all these plugins on different pages, and I need to just have one page that just has them all listed out. Here's what this does, here's what that does, and maybe like an overview under here is appropriate. I've been learning a lot as this website has been in the wild. And that's why I put it up, because I build these things and then I get feedback and I make them better. And I've put out updates to every one of my plugins within the last 2 weeks. So these are all under active development, and they're all getting better every day.
Sweet, sweet,
Mm-hmm.
sweet. Okay, my man. Well, I'm not gonna keep you any longer.
It was a pleasure. I
No
really
doubt.
enjoyed blabbing at you for the last 90 minutes, but you're very good questions, and I'm glad you asked them. I'm glad I got an opportunity to explain myself. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. All right, folks. That's a wrap. What a great interview with Dave Bloom of Ginger Soul Records. And of course, I'm Ralph Claxton of RalphClaxton.com. Listen, folks, if you want to listen to more interviews like this from innovative folks just like Dave, well, come on over, listen to, or not listen to, but you will be there. I just messed this up, but I'm going to fix it. Come on over to the site, take a listen, leave me your comments and feedback. It will be greatly appreciated. Also, if you know of anybody that you think I should interview, maybe it's yourself or somebody you know, go ahead and reach out to me off the contact form there and let me know who it is so I can reach out to them and get that on the calendar for an interview so we can post it up on the site. And until then, I want you to make it a great one. Take care.